Good afternoon, Rotarians.
Good afternoon, Kevin.
Well, I am amazed to see so many people here today in this beautiful weather we've had over the last couple of days. So, pretty impressed to see this quantity of folks in. Thanks to Scott Bennett and Dick Stoffer for being our greeters today. So we'll give them a little round of applause. And again, as a reminder, if you haven't done it in a while, please sign up and be a greeter at one of our next meetings. Another opportunity to sign up is our moment of inspiration, and we have one today. So I'd like to invite Susan Voss to come up for our moment of inspiration, the Pledge of Allegiance, four-way test, and we'll have an opportunity to greet each other. So, Susan?
In honor of our speaker today, I wanted to do something, excuse me, that was a little bit on the education side. And I found these inspirations by Maya Angelou, and I wanted to share them with you. I've learned that no matter what happens or how bad it seems today, life does go on, and it will be better tomorrow. I've learned that making a living is not the same as making a life. I've learned that life sometimes gives you a second chance. I've learned that even when I have pains, I don't have to be one. I've learned that every day you should reach out and touch someone. People love a warm hug or just a friendly pat on the back. I've learned that I still have a lot to learn. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Now let's do the Pledge of Allegiance and the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is it true?
Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Great. Great.
How are you?
Hi, good, George.
Hey, Doug. I told you I'd come over and shake your hand. You're still moving. Hello again, my friend. Thank you. I like that tie. I love it. Really? Very nice. Awesome.
Hey, Doc. Hey, good to see you. Good job, Andy. Mr. Kyle.
Table mate. I'll shake your hand. Good to see you. How you doing, my friend? It's good to see you. How are you? How you doing? Yeah, just got back to that. I think in Texas. Hey, Ryan, you warned me to do that. I was going to be 13. I might have to back up. I'm going to I don't know what they're. Good to see you, Eric. Mr. David? I'll give him Sorry, Kevin, that's my wife. You're nice to talk.
That's okay. All right, thank you, everybody. We'll get started again. We have a number of guests here today, so the way we do that is that I'll introduce you. I'll ask you to stand as I introduce you, and then remain standing, and then we'll recognize you all at once, okay? So first off, Marnie Hockenberg has two guests today. We have Artis Kelly, interim CEO of the Iowa Society of CPAs, and Bree Pinot, CEO of Blink. And our speaker today, Steve McCullough, has a couple of guests. We have Aaron Lacey, Executive Vice President at Iowa Student Loan, and Heather Garcia, who's also the wife of our wonderful Juan Garcia.
Sorry.
Also, David Ohm has a guest, Chris Hensley, former city council member, and also currently the chair of the board at Iowa Student Loan. Abide Nadi Perm has brought in Autumn McGill from the Iowa Hospital Association. And that is it. So welcome everybody. We really appreciate you being with us here today. We have a birthday in the club today. He's not here, but Todd Wishman's birthday from Bankers Trust is today. So if you know Todd, send him a little birthday wish. Next segment is where in the world is club number 27? We're the 27th club in the world. Now we're 35,000 clubs, so that's where that came from. And the first one is a pretty cool thing with Carter Smith's family. There he is at the recent LPGA Tour event. His sister Kate just got into the LPGA, made it to the LPGA. This was her first tournament. And so he went down there with the family. He's brought his dad here a number of times. His dad actually coached Kate, which is kind of a cool thing. Anyway, I tracked it. She was 4 over the first day. Little nerves, I suppose, right? Second day, 4 under, made the cut at even on her first tournament. So ended up 35th in her first tournament. Pretty good. The other one is having a little fun. Is Chris here? Is Chris here? Is Chris here? Chris isn't here today. Okay. So to put this in context. Last week, if you weren't here, I did my Did You Know about the ag industry, and particularly got into eggs. And I said, I'm going to test you on. I didn't think anybody would get this because I pulled $5 out of my pocket. And I said, I will, if you get this within 10%, I will buy you an egg McMuffin. And so it was a question of how many eggs does a layer lay in a year? How many eggs produce a year? And he was within that 10% number. So $5 to him to go get an egg McMuffin, and there he is.
What's the answer?
The answer was 228, and he said 250, so within that 10%. So there goes my $5. I don't have $5 today for you. For now we move into the Did You Know. I got to manage that a little bit. So anyway, we have Valentine's Day tomorrow. So you know, right? If you forgot, yeah, you got to get out there. So I thought about doing the Did You Know about chocolate. So I always try to get you. Hopefully, you'll learn something right with this, and we have a little fun as well. And so here's the question that I learned something about: where did German chocolate cake come from? U.S., Belgium, Switzerland, or Germany?
Switzerland.
Neither one. No Belgium, no Switzerland. Germany, no. All right, so I'm not the only one who didn't know this. I thought German chocolate came from Germany, right? No. It came from the United States, invented by a baker named Samuel German. There you go. Share that today, or tonight at dinner. And now, one more is, how many pounds of chocolate are purchased in the U.S. the week before Valentine's Day? Start sending out numbers.
2 tons.
No, much more than that. I think in terms of pounds. I had to do math there. I had to do math. What's more than that?
1 million.
More than that. One more.
4 million.
10 million? 58 million pounds of chocolate is purchased in the United States a week before Valentine's Day. There you go. And now, just as Ann takes a bite of food, I'm going to invite Ann Schmerla up to speak about the Community Service Committee work going on right now. So, Ann?
Hello. Well, all of you are aware that we have an active community service committee, and we have one of our next next activity is coming up on February 21st. Hopefully everybody read about it in our newsletter, but it is our blood donation drive. So this year we're going to be hosting it at the zoo. We encourage everybody to sign up, but I have a couple of quick facts for you just so you understand how important it is to support blood donations if you can. Every 2 seconds, someone in the U.S. needs blood or platelets, and that's used for accidents, surgeries, cancer patients, etc. Approximately 29,000 units of red blood cells are needed every day in the United States. A single car accident victim can require as many as 100 units of blood. So if you think about how fast the supplies go through. And then one donation can help save more than one life. So all very important facts. So I hope you can come out and join us. So we've said before that we ask for your money and your time, and now we're asking for your blood. So if you want out, in the newsletter has the code or the website that you can go on. It's through the Red Cross, so you can sign up, and then you get to hang out with me at the zoo for the afternoon. So thank you.
And now Randy Worth is going to come up and speak about our fellowship group wheels.
Carter, I shot a 70 one time, but my miniature golf course is not there any longer. A week from this Saturday, the 22nd, Carl Customs, which used to be Carl Performance, is holding an open house. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity for the Wheels group to invade. We've been there once before, but several years ago. Carl's connection to Chevrolet, you don't have to be any one brand specific, because they work on anything that you're willing to pay them for. So the open house, if we're going to want to meet at 10 o'clock a week from this Saturday. If you can't go at 10 or don't want to go with me at 10, you can go anytime between 8 and 1. It's just help yourself, look around type of open house. But I thought, okay, 10 o'clock next week from Saturday the 22nd. There'll be more in the bulletin next week, and I'll harass you next week too. Thank you.
And as announced last week, the Iowa Wolves game to end polio is coming up on February 28th. And so on your tables, you can sign up to donate $20 to send kids to go, or you can go yourself with you must use the QR code. Was that on the table as well? QR code to attend the game yourself. Thanks to Jeff Stickle for being a part of that, our representative, part of that area-wide event. And now it's my pleasure to introduce another new-ish member, Sue Tempero. Sue was sponsored by John Tome, so thank you, John. Sue and her husband were both members of our club when they, prior to moving to Indianapolis many years ago. Here are the 5 fun facts that we asked, and Sue's response. So if you've got a free day, Sue, what would we find you doing? Well, she'd take advantage of that free day and divide it in half, she says. In the morning, she'd be on the computer to write a chapter of her life story, which she's planning to do. And in the afternoon, she'd go through files and boxes and organize her desk, since she's way behind. We can all relate. We can all relate to that. We should do that. Where in the world have you traveled and you can't wait to go back to? Sue wants to return to Japan. She's been there 3 times and has deep connections. Sue studied Japanese anthropology at the East-West Center in Hawaii, and 55 years ago hosted a Japanese student at Stanford. The families there still remain close, visiting each other over the years. She was also involved in the Des Moines Sister City program, hosting Mayumi from Kofu. Kofu was the sister city for a year while she attended Roosevelt, and still stays in touch with Mayumi as well. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Follow the golden rule to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. However, with her interest in sensitivity to differences and inclusion, Sue's adopted the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they would do unto themselves. What talent or skill do you possess that might surprise or delight people? Sue received her master's degree from Northwestern University in oral interpretation of literature. Interesting. She loves to read out loud, and especially poetry. Her favorite poet, Robert Frost's poem, "The Road Not Taken," has been a guide to her life. It says, "Two roads diverged, and I took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference." Sue enjoys genealogy and is a member of the National Society of Colonial Dames of America, and her ancestor was the first governor of Connecticut. She serves on the board of the Gunston Hall, which is the Virginia ancestral home of George Mason, who wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which was the basis of our Bill of Rights. Now I'll ask Sue to come on up and answer the final question herself and share a few words. You joined our Rotary Club. What can't you wait to tell other folks about our club? So Sue?
Thanks, Kevin. And thank you, all of you. I'm actually an old, in a variety of ways, new member. Since I was, as Kevin said, here over 27 years ago. Both Dick and I were members. And when we moved to Indianapolis, we got involved in the Rotary Club there. We both served on the boards, the Rotary Club board there, and I ended up being the president of the Indianapolis Rotary Foundation. We also traveled to Guatemala, Kenya, and Jamaica through Rotary. So I'm a big Rotary fan. But just tell you, I'm from a small town in Nebraska, and I've had several professions, including teaching high school, college administrator. I worked for the Institute of International Education, administered Fulbright grants. I also worked for congressmen, and when we came to Iowa, I ended up working for the Refugee Service Center prior to joining the Register, where I ended up being the vice president of human resources for 17 years. So after we retired, and we lived in Indianapolis, and we didn't have any family there, we were very involved in the community. But Dick died almost 2.5 years ago, and my family decided I should be near family. Our daughter lives in St. Louis, and our son Howard, who's a member of the 7 a.m. Rotary Club, lives here with his family. So having lived here for 20 years and had a good experience, I decided I'd move back to Des Moines. So I moved back in June, and thanks to a lot of different people, it's really been good. But I really am grateful to John for inviting me to come to Rotary, and I'm really pleased to be a member because I do think this Rotary Club is very good. But as I said, I'm from Nebraska, and also wanted you to know that a Nebraskan you may not have heard of, but his name is Ted Kooser, and he was a U.S. Poet Laureate from 2004 to 2006. But he went to Iowa State for his undergraduate and then went to the University of Nebraska. And in 1986, he decided that he would do some poems. And so he wrote 50 of his women friends, he sent them a poem. And he did this for over 20 years, and he called pocket poems. And so I'm just going to share this one poem with you that he wrote. and this is a Valentine. If this comes creased and creased again and soiled, as if I'd opened it 1,000 times to see what I'd written here was right, it's all because I looked too long for you to put it in your pocket. Midnight says the little gifts of loneliness come wrapped by nervous fingers. What I wanted this to say was that I want to be so close that when you find it, it is warm for me. Happy Valentine's Day.
That was wonderful, thanks, Sue. And now John Lorenzen to introduce our program for today.
Good afternoon. It's my honor to introduce our speaker today, one of our own, Steve McCullough. He is currently the president and CEO of Iowa Student Loan Liquidity Corporation. It's a private, nonprofit student loan company. Their offices are in West Des Moines. Steve joined the company in 1989 as CFO and became CEO in 1993. Steve was a junior Rotarian in high school, University of Iowa grad, passed his CPA exam in 1986, started his career with Deloitte, Des Moines, and graduated from the University of Iowa's executive MBA program in 1992 with an emphasis in finance. So please, welcome along with me, Steve McCullough.
Okay, Kitty promised I turned on. Yay. All right, so I don't have any poetry. Sorry. I don't know that there is any poetry about student loans, although I'm sure there's quite a few things that have been said about them. So I'm Steve McCullough. I started my career at Deloitte, having been hired there by Christine Hensley, who ironically is still my boss as the chair. And when I was at Deloitte and I'd go see my clients, I noticed that when I introduced myself and told them what I was there for, they didn't always smile, because I was an auditor. So when I had enough of that, I went to work at Iowa Student Loan. And you know what? When I tell people who I am and what I do, student loans, they don't always smile at me. So I figure my next logical step is IRS agent. Okay, so I actually love working at Iowa Student Loan. It's a nonprofit. Its mission is to help students and parents succeed in education and careers after high school, which is a mission that I'm very passionate about. But it's gotten harder, honestly, because student loans have been politicized. People arguing about whether they should be forgiven or whether that's fair. I'm not here to get into that today. But what I do want to do is talk to you about the facts and whether there's a real student loan crisis. So let's get into the facts. How much student loan borrowing is out there? Well, right now, there's $1.6 trillion in student loans outstanding to 42.8 million people. That's a lot. The amount of loans outstanding has tripled since 2007, 17 years, and the amount average being borrowed has doubled. So it's gotten big. Who are those loans being made to? Well, undergraduates and their parents borrowing for undergraduate education. About $45 billion a year are being borrowed. Graduate students are borrowing about $41 billion a year. So almost half of the annual borrowing is by grad students. So what makes up that 1.6 trillion? 10% of the borrowers have student loan debt greater than $80,000. But that 10% makes up almost half of all the outstanding loans. So almost half of the 1.6 trillion is made up of the 10%, the small sliver of people that have very large loans. Okay? Conversely, 32% of borrowers have less than $10,000. They only make up 4% of the outstanding portfolio. What that tells you is that big portfolio is dominated by large borrowers who are graduate students. So are people able to repay their student loans? Well, here's a stat for you. $30,000 loan on a standard repayment plan, 10 years, 6% interest, that monthly payment is about $150. So put that in perspective, that's less than half probably of what a car payment would be, okay? 75% of borrowers are making regular payments on normal repayment plans, or they're not required to make payments at all because they're in school or they're in brace. 25% of borrowers are not making payments. Now, of that 25%, 12% are on deferment or forbearance, so they're on temporary periods where they don't have to make payments. 13% are in default, which means they have failed to be able to repay their loans. Now, of that 13% that are in default, over half of them are borrowers under $5,000 in loans outstanding, small loans. But those are people that likely dropped out of college, so they incurred the debt, but they didn't get the degree. And unfortunately, people of lower socioeconomic status are much more likely to drop out of college. So that tells you who it is that's defaulting on their loans. Repayment plans. Nothing simple in student loans. We have a variety of payment plans that determine the amount that people have to pay. 52% of borrowers, however, are on the regular fixed payment monthly plan, over half. Another 8% are on what's called the graduated repayment plan. Over 6 years, their payments ratchet up. Start low, 2 years later a little bit more, 2 years later a little bit more, and then normal payment amounts. So they have time to get up on their feet on the graduated plan. That's 60% when you add it to the regular repayment plans. 40% of people are in what they call the income-driven repayment plans. Very complicated formula. They calculate what they believe your disposable income is, and then you have to pay 10% of that. And after 20 years of payments, supposedly your loan is going to be forgiven, okay? So you have the assurance of knowing I'm not going to have to pay more than 20 years, and I'll be able to pay an affordable payment amount as a percentage of my salary. Sounds good, right? That should solve all the problems. Well, there are pros and cons to income-driven repayment. The pros are, it's a comfortable payment amount that people can make. It eliminates the risk of failure in terms of I graduated and I didn't get a good paying job now, but I only have to pay as a percentage of my income, so I guess that's okay. And there's a promise of that loan forgiveness after 20 years. Here's the downside. The payment amounts are so low, they don't always cover the accumulating interest on your loan. That means I'm making a payment, but my loan balance is going up instead of down. So their loans actually start ballooning if they're not making a high enough payment. The loan forgiveness portion of this plan is currently tied up in court and may be eliminated by a court ruling. So people may not get the loan forgiveness that was part of this, supposedly. And then here is the real downside. If people believe, well, I think my loan is going to get forgiven or I'm not going to have to pay that much, what do? They borrow the maximums. Human nature, right? That's never good. It's never good to borrow the maximum amount that you can borrow whether you need it or not. And that's one of the things that we're very concerned about. So the bottom line, is there a crisis? Well, for most people, there's not. They're making regular payments on payment plans that they can afford, and they're able to cope with their loan. There is a crisis in two niches of the portfolio. Those niches are people that borrowed so much that they can't afford to repay that loan based on the earning potential of the degree that they received, okay? And the second is students that drop out and they don't have a degree, but yet they still have the debt. So it's these two pieces of the portfolio where people are really struggling. So what do we do about it? So the solution is going to require collaboration. It's going to take the federal government, the state government, colleges, student loan providers, other experts to all come together in goodwill to say, what do we really need to do to help students and student borrowers? Congress really needs to take a second look at graduate student borrowing. Is that really what we intended here when we started this program, to have that much being borrowed by graduate students? And then Congress should also consider, for people of lower social economic status, for at-risk families, having them receive grants rather than student loans. Because the biggest risk of all is having someone from that status attempt college, not graduate, but then have a big student loan to have to repay. It's kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do here. So the irony to that is, remember, those people are defaulting at pretty high rates. Those are loan losses to the federal government. If you give them grants instead, you're not going to have that loan loss. So part of the grant can be paid for just by the lower loan losses from this group. And then finally, what do we need to do? We need to do better counseling in advance of college for students and their parents. We need to let them know, look, these are the things you really need to be considering. You need to consider what your major is going to be, what the likely outcome is going to be of that major, how much you can earn in that major, and then experts, including Iowa Student Loan, we recommend don't borrow any more than your average starting salary, right? So you need to find a way to make that work in the amount that you're going to have to borrow for college. So this is all pretty dire and, you know, not very uplifting. I'm seeing some frowns out there. Let's talk about the good news. And that's what's going on here in Iowa, okay? Iowa Student Loan and the colleges in the state, we've been working on this issue very hard, and we've had success. We've been able to keep the borrowing levels in Iowa static at the same amount for the last 10 years, the average borrowing amounts. And that's significant. We're now one of the lowest average borrowing states for student loans in the country, okay? $39,900 on average for our graduates. That's why I gave you the quote of $30,000 for a payment amount of $150 a month. Nationally, that's $36,400, so we're below that. There's only one state that has lower borrowing levels than Iowa, and that's North Dakota. Now, North Dakota doesn't get a lot of accolades, so we'll give them that one, right? Gotta have something to brag about. So Iowa Student Loan, before anybody can borrow from us on our private student loan programs, we have them go through tutorials to make sure they understand what they're getting themselves into. We have a whole battery of tools, but then they have to go through, it's called the Student Loan Game Plan. And what the Student Loan Game Plan does is ask them, well, what's your major? And let's talk about how much you think you're going to end up borrowing and seeing if you're going to be able to afford that student loan when you graduate. And we'll give you a snapshot of what your life might look like if you borrow that much money after you graduate. So we're really trying to let people make informed decisions. So we ask them when they start, how much do you think you want to borrow? We have them go through the tool. And then at the end we say, now how much do you want to borrow? And we see a significant number of people reducing their borrowing request, which tells us something important. If you give people good information, they'll make better choices. So, it's not just us doing this. We have colleges that are doing great work. Grandview has what's called GD Complete, and that's where they're showing their students how to borrow less money and graduate on time. Drake has an amazing percentage of their student body, over 85%, that's doing internships and getting good college level jobs when they graduate. You've got University of Northern Iowa, they have a program called Live Like a College Student. It's exactly what it sounds like. If you'll be frugal in college and live within your means, you don't have to borrow as much money. And you know, I don't know, when I was in college, I had fun living like a poor college student and mooching off of everybody. But I didn't think they wanted to call it, we'll teach you how to mooch off of you. So, the end of the day, Senator Grassley heard about all these programs, called us all together, and he sponsored a bill called Know Before You Owe. And what it's doing is it's requiring all the colleges in the country to offer programs like this to educate their students about degrees have different earning expectations, different advisable borrowing levels based on how much you're going to make when you graduate, all the things people really need to know to make good choices. And that's what I'll leave you with today. You know, I'm a father of 4 kids. Now I have my first grandchild. I won't divert talking about him. But also I've worked with a lot of students. And here's what I can tell you. They want to be treated like adults. They want to make their own decisions. And you know what? If you give them good information and you're willing to tell them the hard facts, they'll make better choices. So I would encourage all of you in the audience, if you have kids, grandkids, tell them the truth about what they need to know about life after high school. The fact is, you're gonna have to make money to earn your own way in the world, and your choices that you make about college, majors, or trade school, they'll determine how much money you're gonna make and what type of lifestyle you can afford. So make good choices. So, that's what I have for you, and now I'm just gonna open it up for questions. Yes?
I understand, your role is to counsel students who are trying to get loans. I'm kind of curious, do you have any thoughts on, what is it that is driving the costs in higher education increase? And, I know, there are different perspectives on that. I wonder if you have one.
So the question was, what's driving the cost of education increasing? And what I can tell you is it's multi-factor. We're fortunate we have representatives from our private colleges that serve on our board, and I ask them questions about this all the time. They're like a lot of other businesses, but they are definitely dependent on staffing for their largest single cost. So all the things that have impacted all of us about inflation and particularly salaries and everything else affect them, but they also then have to compete to get the best professors to teach their classes. So they've had a lot of things that have caused their cost base to be increasing. And then of course they have to, unfortunately, try and have people pay more money to go there. But they also have severe competitive pressures right now because the demographics are such, there's gonna be fewer college students in the future. We also have a record number of students now graduating from high school deciding not to pursue four-year degrees. So the competition for students to fill the seats is really there. And so you're seeing colleges having to discount their tuitions to fill up their seats at the college. Yes?
Could you say something about, I've heard in the news, some of these colleges and things deliberately getting their students to take on more loans in order for the college itself to make money, and I'm talking about sort of the shady ones, and that Congress now has come down on, they can't do that. Can you just say something about that whole industry?
Sure. Are there colleges that intentionally increase their tuition amounts and have people borrow the maximum so they can make more money? There was a controversy among some for-profit colleges that were determined to be doing just that. They've been shut down, and the federal government has forgiven the government loans that were made to those students to try and make it right. I can tell you that the vast majority of colleges aren't doing that because of the competitive pressures, if for nothing else, besides their ethics, but because of the competitive pressures, they can't charge just whatever they want to anymore because they've got to attract the students to come to the university. Yes?
As a father of a senior in high school, I'm glued to the screen here, not trying to sweat too much. If my senior was sitting here, what would you tell him as we kind of go through the colleges that we're visiting, things like that too, and trying to make those decisions? What would you tell them?
So what would I tell a young person that's about to go to college to help them make good choices? The first thing I would say is do the research to figure out what career you would like to have in the future. So you work backwards then. What college has the best program for that particular degree or that line of study? Because really the reason you go to college is for the outcome. So if at all possible, not everybody can do this because they don't know what they want to do, but if at all possible, determine that goal and that outcome you're trying to create before you go. And then also consider the fact that how much you pay for it, how much you end up having to borrow, are also critical questions because that will determine. So even if you get a good job after college, you manage to graduate, you manage to get into your job, if you borrowed way too much money, they still might have to come live with you at home. Which, I guess that's the other thing. I was always one who was kind of blunt with my kids. I would say things like, you don't want to live with us after college, do you? Because I really don't want you to. And I'll charge you rent if you do. But those are motivators, right? So, that creating the good outcome from college is the most important thing. It's not getting accepted to a college, or even which college you get accepted to. It's being successful there, and then having your job search in mind the entire time. Yes?
So can you walk me through where where your funding is and what happens when there might be less federal money involved in loans?
Sure. So the question is, what's our funding sources? What happens if the federal government has less money? Right now, that's a big thing, right? Because there's a lot of grants being put on hold and everything else. Well, we don't get any money from the federal government, and we don't get any money from the state government. That's the good news. The type of loans we're making are private student loans. We get that money by issuing bonds on Wall Street, which means we have to make sure that the loans we're making meet the criteria of rating agencies, that investors will buy our bonds. So it's a whole different segment of people you've got a piece so you can make sure and get funding. But for the most part, we're independent of those issues. We have a large portfolio of loans we made back in the 80s and 90s when it used to be the guaranteed student loan program that banks were involved in. And those are affected by the federal government, but not the revenue streams on those loans.
So somebody coming to you for a loan has other multiple avenues to get money, whether that's Pell Grants or other
Yes.
federal or state.
So the question is, people that come to us, what are their other funding sources? Well, people that come to us are people that they've already gotten their financial aid from their college. They've gotten their Pell Grant. The student themselves has borrowed to the extent that they can. But then the family's told, here's your remaining bill that you're responsible for, right? It's the expected family contribution. It's their portion that they're supposed to pay out of pocket. Well, guess what? A lot of people don't have that money, at least not readily available. So then they'll borrow additional money from us for that portion that the family's supposed to be paying to the college. Yes?
So Steve, was the map you put up there about the default experience was that the sum of both the private and the direct student loans, or just the direct student loans?
That's the direct student loans, that's the federal student loans. That's where all the debate has been about, whether we need to forgive loans, redo repayment plans, what do we need to do? But it kind of, once you see all the facts, it kind of puts things in perspective, right? But it also, more importantly, targets where that effort needs to be employed. Who is it that we need to be trying to help, and how do we do that? Yes?
Kids who go into social work have to get an extra year to get their degree, and then they burn out after 3 years. Is anybody counseling that particular profession?
So the example was a social worker that has to go an extra year and then gets burned out after 3 years and ends up doing something completely different. Is anyone counseling people in that area or other areas like that? Right now, the answer is maybe. They may have someone at their college that's talking to them about that. But that's exactly the sort of thing that we're saying we need to be talking to our young people about even before they go to college, so they understand that. Another example I'll give you, I guess I'll editorialize just a bit. Teachers. Many teachers are notoriously underpaid relative to the amount of education that's now required of them when they're required now to have masters and extra training beyond bachelor's degrees. If you add up the debt that many of them end up incurring versus the starting salaries for teachers, it doesn't necessarily match. And what's happening is the societal need and benefit of teachers isn't matching the salaries that they're being paid relative to what they're having to borrow. But that's another reason why these equations are important and they're good to look at, because it helps you understand where there's an issue.
Could you talk more about ISL's community investment?
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing with it?
So at Iowa Student Loan, it's a nonprofit. If we do have money left over after we fund our reserve for loan losses and pay all of our people, what we do with it is what we're calling community reinvestments, and that's how do we serve the people of Iowa? What do we do with that money? Well, one of the most important things we do is fund the Iowa College Access Network. Now that's a group of people that are on college campuses throughout the state. When you hear at a high school that someone's doing a financial aid night or a college planning night and they request all the parents to come, that's the Iowa College Access Network in every high school in the state, trying to do exactly what we've been talking about here, which is help counsel those families so they can make better choices. So that's one of the biggest things that we do. The single biggest thing we do is we try and charge lower interest rates, the lowest interest rate we possibly can on our private student loans. So the rates on our private student loans are substantially lower than what are being offered by for-profit companies that are out there. And then finally, we have all of these tools that we're providing that we have online available to anyone. The other thing we do is we offer scholarships for both high school students, college students, and their parents. If they'll use these tools, they can qualify for a scholarship. And we're very proud of the amount of money that we're putting out there as scholarships, but even more proud that these people are using these tools so they get the counseling they need to make better choices. Yes?
Thanks again for your presentation. There's a lot of shortages in the workforce. Dean mentioned mental health and social work, and one program that caught my eye was the repayment program the state's offering specifically for mental health.
Yes.
Curious your perspective on programs like that, and if be trending in that direction in the future.
So the question is loan repayment programs for specific shortage needs, particularly here in Iowa. The governor's proposed a doubling of the amount for residents, medical residents, to try and help increase the number of doctors we have in the state. And those are really effective, particularly if they're professions that require a lot of borrowing. Those people have this big weight on their shoulders, and it is influencing their decision making. But if they know that they have an opportunity to have that burden relieved from them, it'll influence their choice, and we've seen that. So we're 100% in favor of those programs, and we can tell you they are effective. Yes?
What's the yield of the bonds you use for your funding?
Most of our, well, I'm glad you asked that question. What's the yield of our bonds, Aaron? Taxable, tax exempt?
Taxables about 5.8 right now, and tax exempt's a little over 3.
Okay, on a tax exempt basis, it's a little over 3% we're paying our bondholders. And for our taxable bonds, which is the majority of the bonds we issue, it's about 5.8%. So, and those are specialized bonds. Most of them are purchased by large institutional funds, so mutual funds, because it's a very specialized type of bond backed by student loans, and as you just heard, they're kind of complicated. So it's just not every investor that's willing to come to us and want to invest in our bonds.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and I appreciate all that you do there, our student loan, and appreciate you being a member of our club. Okay, upcoming speakers. We have CEO of West Bank, Dave Nelson, coming up on February 20th. We've got Chad Hahn, meteorologist at National Weather Service, and March 6th, Kelly Baum, director at the Des Moines Arts Center. So a real varied group of programs coming up. So as we always say, think about somebody that might be interested in one of these programs and bring them as a guest of our club. Also, upcoming events to participate in. We had a morning fuel with Susan Voss this past Tuesday. It was wonderful, Susan. Thank you for that. Upcoming for our guests, we have one Tuesday where we get together for coffee and highlight one of our members. And so the next one coming up is March 25th. Put that on your calendar at 9 a.m. Freedom Blend Coffee. Tej Dewan will be our featured member, talking about his career and also leading the Plains Angels. And then we have signed up Helen Miller will be April 29th, telling her story. And interestingly, she just wrote a book. So we've got a few people interested in. And so it was just published, so I'm sure she'll tell us about that. So coffee on March 25th at 9 a.m. and April 29th. Also, don't forget your our spring fling turned into spring party, hosted by President Tim Lilwitz and EJ. Invites were emailed. I just received the email, and then you also put something in the mail as well, right? So be sure to register for that and join us March 27th. That's from 6 to 8 on the 27th. And just a reminder, these are our strategies for the next 3 years. We have 3 pillars, it's relationship building, it's community impact, and it's membership. So what can you guys do to help those in the next week? Make it a great week, everybody. We are adjourned.